Can you believe we have fans?
Well, I mean, maybe fan. Yeah, but yes, I can. I can
good
believe.
fan.
Yeah,
Yes.
Well, I'm your fan.
Oh, well played.
Thank
and I'm
you,
yours
thank
as well.
Yeah. No, it's very flattering and humbling to be able to say that we have a fan base.
Oh my gosh. Yeah.
Right. Yes.
Yeah.
I have to say that a lot of the work that we do, we're alone in the booth and we don't really get a chance to interact as much. But now that we've been doing a lot of these live events, the conventions, and we get to meet these fans, there's really been some amazing stories and experiences that they've shared with us. Which
they're so generous. They're so alive and motivated when we see them.
Mm-hmm.
It's almost like they're sparkling.
Yeah. I know I have a list of incredibly moving moments that I've experienced, and I'm sure you do too.
Yeah, it's like you said, it's humbling, and to have a show that's popular when it's on is one thing. That they still care about it after 20 years or more of the debut is amazing to me. On top of how it's amazing otherwise.
Yeah, and I mean, of course, I would love to take the credit as only just because of the amazing voice acting and directing that's part of the show. But I mean, let's be honest; it's also because of the actual content and the creative.
It's for sure that.
Yeah, and Takahashi's vision of telling a story like this.
We are custodians to that original creativity.
Yes. So,
yes.
But yes. Well, I mean, I think that maybe that's something that we should share today.
Well, let's get into it.
Welcome to the Heart of the Cards, a conversation about creativity, inspiration, and dealing with what we're dealt.
Hey, this is Dan Green.
And Eric Stewart.
And we are delighted to talk about how wonderful our fans are.
Yes.
To get to know how wonderfully they treat us, how wonderful it is that they even exist.
Mm-hmm.
And this will be episode 12, I guess, of the Heart of the Cards.
Wow.
And this one is, I know, it seems like it's been going on forever, and then it seems like it's barely just begun.
Yes, and thank you, everyone, for listening and paying attention to what the two of us have to talk about. That also means a lot to us as well, if we're going to share fan stories.
Absolutely. So you mentioned that you had so many to choose from, and I do as well. Do you want to go first, or shall I go first, or how do you want to do this?
You know what? I'll go first this time.
Very good.
Yeah, is that all right? Yeah,
I love that. I love that.
Okay, good. There's so many great experiences meeting the fans in person, but this one started with an email. In the days of dial-up. For those of you who are old enough to remember that,
I'll try to plug in the sound of that.
Okay, thank you.
Just underneath your whole story. Yeah.
You've got mail. I used to try to answer every piece of fan mail that I received through my website at the time.
Wow.
And I just did. I just was amazed that anyone wanted to reach out and talk to me and ask me questions and tell me that they liked the shows we were working on. It was a really cool thing. And I remember getting one email from a young woman who was she told me that I think she was in like 5th or 6th grade. And she had just moved and started a new school and didn't have a lot of friends and wanted to know if there was a way she could ask me some questions, because one of the assignments was to do a sort of Q&A with someone that they respected, that inspired them. And I was very flattered that she chose me. And it was a series of questions of how I got into the business and what I liked about it the most, and, pretty sort of safe questions. And she said it would really mean a lot to me if you did this, if you answered these questions. And I think maybe there were 5 or 6 of them. And so I answered the questions, and I got a response, after sending it back to her, thank you so much. And that was it. I figured that would be the end of it. I didn't want to know if she got an A+ because of my amazing answers, or if she got a C because who was Eric Stewart and why do you want to know anything from him? But then, fast forward, I was doing an event in Florida, a big convention. And this must have been, 15 years later, maybe even more. And this young woman comes up to my table, and she's got like a vendor pass. For those of you who are not familiar with going to conventions, your credentials, you usually have to wear them around your neck so that, people know
those lanyards can mean a lot.
That's true, yes. You're allowed to go here, you're not allowed to go there. But she was wearing a vendor pass. And she came up to my table and said, "Hey, I don't know if you're going to remember me because it's been so many years, but I wrote to you when I was in fifth grade, and I asked you to do this interview, these couple of questions for me because I was transferring to a new school, and I kind of remembered. I was like, it's not like I have millions and millions of fans, and I do try to pay attention to everyone that reaches out to me so that I do have some sort of like, oh, I know that name, or I remember your cosplay, or whatever it is. I do try. And I thought, yeah, that sounds familiar. I said, I just don't know the questions you asked me or whatever. But that's great that you remembered me. And she said, well, I actually have a printout of the email that you sent back to me.
Oh my gosh.
And she said, I just have to tell you that I read that in class, and people were so impressed that you responded to me, and they thought, okay, now we're friends, which made me more popular. And all of a sudden I had friends myself. And that really helped me so much. And of course, I was completely humbled by that part of it. And I said, wow, that's incredible. She goes, yeah. I said, what are you doing here? She says, well, my fiance is one of the artists and I work with him. And I thought, wow, what a change of personality too, from, sort of the new kid at the school who was trying so hard to fit in, and now working in the industry. It was great. And so she then said, I brought this printout of the email. Would you sign it for me? And it was like, it was so amazing. I don't think that what I do for a living always changes someone's life. That's really no. But when you see that you can't take these things for granted. You can't take every interaction you have with someone of how that's affecting them. And which is why I always say, please try to be kind when you do meet someone, even if you're having a terrible day, because you don't know how that's going to affect them. And also, as you say, I mean, you're not the only person to say this, but you've never walked a mile in their shoes. No.
Everyone's fighting their own fight. Everyone has their own struggle.
Yeah, and if you're going to put yourself out there in the world as an actor or an entertainer that is accessible to an audience beyond their work, then when they do approach you tactfully, you should be kind about that moment for that person. So this email that was sent to me, I could have easily blown off and said, I don't have time for this. Well, how is this going to help my career, my drive? This has nothing to do with my work. No, as a human being, I was like, well, that's very sweet that she wants to talk to me, and great. And of course, I never knew what came of that, except when I finally met her. And it really meant a lot to me. I'm the guy that will cry at a Hallmark commercial, especially if it has a dog in it.
And I'm the guy with the Kleenex right next to you.
Thank you. That's why we travel together. But I was really it just emotionally overcome by that. I needed a moment. It really touched me, and just once again gave me some sort of reason to be a better person, to be a nicer person, to really pay attention to interaction with people, and not take the fandom for granted ever. And so when I do see that behavior from anyone else, it really rubs me the wrong way, because you don't know how it's going to either help or change or motivate someone to just be kind. So that's
Right.
my first and most powerful, I think, fan moment for me. That was really very special.
That's awesome. Thanks for sharing that. Let me just react to that a little bit. So you have mentioned before in this podcast and elsewhere that voiceover is your job and your music is your passion.
Yes.
And was this a wake-up call, a realization moment where you imparted more value than you realized with this fan?
Yeah, I mean, as much as I have definitely said that the voice acting world is the things that help me pay my bills, I do love what I do.
Right.
But
you
do
always say that.
Right, but I do believe that in my soul I am a singer-songwriter first. But the difference between music fans and the anime fans are very, very different in terms of loyalty. I joke around about,
of course, it's
right.
they're different things. Go ahead.
They are, but I joke around about music fans are like, oh man, Eric Stewart's amazing. I love his entire first album is incredible. I listen to every one of those songs all the time. Then you release a second album. Yeah, I like it. There's like 4 or 5 songs I like on his new album, but it's it's not really my favorite. But I'll listen to it here and there. You come out with the third album, they're like, yeah, he's really changed what he's doing, and that's so last year. I don't know if I'm really paying attention to him. But then you look at the anime fans, and it's like, oh, Eric Stewart's in the show. I love it. It's fantastic. This is great. I have every episode. The second series you're on, you play a bit part, and they're like, well, Eric Stewart's not really one of the main characters, but he's got these really funny lines here and there. So, I downloaded everything and I've been binge watching it. And then the third series you're on, like, Eric Stewart's not in this series, but he walked by the studio while they were recording it, and I now need to own every DVD of it and have him autograph it.
If you're able to contribute as little as $1 a month, consider going to our Patreon page. Visit AndromedaProductions.com and see what's in store. If this is content you enjoy, please like, subscribe, and share on YouTube.
So I mean, it's a joke, but it's just there is a loyalty and a connection that I have been blessed enough to experience from my anime fan base that has been so consistent, and they become my music fan base too. I mean, those people support anything that I do, which is amazing. I cannot thank you enough for that. But yes, this moment was another one of those reminders that voice acting might be my day job, but it can affect people if I at least pay attention to not just the income from it, but the content and the passion I have for my characters and how I portray them.
Also, something about what you're defining between the music fans and the fans of your anime work and other voice work, it's not that you've only done anime, is speaking to the difference between being the originator of the material, the creator, and being a part of the creation, which is the role of the actor. And I think fans understand that actors are doing their job within a greater context. They aren't the writer. They aren't the creator. And some of that can be frustrating as an actor because you don't feel like you have enough creative input. But the advantage of that is that you also don't take all of the blame.
Well,
and
yes.
If you do your job, then you can come out smelling like roses even in a pile of poop.
I agree. And that's what's...
Not to say that anything we've done is a pile of poop.
No.
But it's true that actors have that advantage. They can always be good even in something that isn't great.
Yeah, and that's a great point because I think that some of the characters that I've played, I benefit from how cool they are as characters. Even if I'm doing a great job, thank you very much, portraying them, I'm starting with something that's also a cool character, whether it's a funny character or it's someone like Kaiba, it's got so many multi-dimensions to it. But hopefully
you've been appropriately cast.
Yeah, but I do think that there is something to be said about the fact that Kaiba is cool, where fans come up to me and say, man, Kaiba's my favorite character. And I think, is he your favorite character because I voice him, or is he your favorite character because he's Kaiba? You know, and I'll take some of the credit, but I also think I would want to be Kaiba if I wasn't just voicing him.
Of course, he's definitely the coolest in that story context. I mean, depending on what how you define cool, but he's the obvious version of cool, and I never take any full responsibility for anything as an actor because I'm just an interpreter.
Sure.
I'm not the creator.
Right. So, and they also ask us if we write our own lines. I mean, you and I have ad-libbed a couple of things.
There are some things we interpret, but we don't really, we don't create the story. So even where we actually make the words happen, I wouldn't qualify that as writing.
So basically
that as interpretation.
What we're both saying is if you like what we're doing, it will take the credit. If you don't, blame the writer.
Exactly. We want to have that two-faced relationship, so we only take the good and never the bad.
Exactly.
Because we're shallow.
That's one to grow on from Uncle Dan and Uncle Eric. Well, anyway, so that's my first story.
That's your opener. Okay.
Yes. Do you have one you'd like to share?
Oh, I do.
Yeah.
And there's many to choose from, but I'll start with this. We were in Manchester in 2017.
I'll believe you.
And almost 18. It was in the fall.
Okay.
And I remember a young man, maybe early 20s, very well cosplaying as Yami. And there was a good crowd there. It was a small convention, but that can also mean you get a lot of attention and a lot of the focus.
Mm-hmm.
We consider ourselves like D-list celebrities, if celebrities at all.
Yeah.
And in that context, though, we were one of the, more relevant people attending. Which, again, I speak for both of us. We say with no arrogance or pride.
No.
That's just the balance of what that was. This young man comes up. And not only is he speaking so properly, but he's got this great posture going on, and his cosplay is really worked out. And he proceeds to tell me this story about himself, which a lot of people do, and that's really a lot of what I love about these interactions. I never considered it a burden to hear what somebody wants to say to me, especially after they've gone to all this effort to be there in that moment, and with this person in particular, in a way, dressed up in a cosplay. This is clearly a meaningful moment, right?
Yeah.
And so I'm happy to be the audience to that. And he proceeds to tell me the story that he's on the spectrum, which is a term that gets used a lot. And of course, that can mean many things. It's a big umbrella. I don't know what precise allocation he was given in terms of a diagnosis, but somewhere, on the autism spectrum. And the way that it manifests in his life early on, because there's many different ways, again, that's why they call it a spectrum, he had difficulty speaking. And I'm sure that's only one of the hurdles that he had to surmount. But then he went on to describe that the portrayal of the Pharaoh in Yu-Gi-Oh!, the voice of the Pharaoh, created a focus for him that he found helpful. And let me just break down for a sec what I'm doing as the voice of the Pharaoh. People say, hey, you kind of sound like somewhere between Yugi and the Pharaoh, which you might say, what kind of makes sense.
Yeah.
But in terms of what I'm not, that I, in my natural speaking, that I do for the Pharaoh is I use more refined diction, a more classical interpretation of a classical hero, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I think what feels right about that is that the character itself is ancient. We consider that, and he's also elevated in his own culture. He's a pharaoh. So to have a more refined way of speaking on just a subliminal level feels like it makes sense. I grew up watching the Ten Commandments with Yul Brynner, right? And, this sense of this grandeur and this precision and this classical feeling seemed to be appropriate. And that's also not really what they do in the Japanese. I fully recognize the differences. But what this young man was saying was that created a focus for him that helped him with his speech. And I must also convey to the audience that as he's telling the story, he's speaking completely fluently. It doesn't feel mechanical. Everything is well pronounced, which is not something that you can associate with a British dialect. I know a lot of people think that everybody who has a British dialect sounds like they're from the Royal Shakespeare Company. That's not true, right? So it's not just a given from his culture, is what I mean by that.
Right.
And I never in a million years would have thought that at a younger age, this particular person had an issue speaking at all. He spoke accurately in terms of the sounds and his diction, but he also spoke eloquently. His word choice was very good and succinct as well. Telling a story also has a lot to do with understanding the attention span of your audience and, when to slow things down and when to speed things up. So he conveyed all of that, I thought, with great aplomb. But then the topper was that he was now spending his time helping people with speech impediments as a speech therapist.
That's incredible.
Amazing.
Yeah. Yeah. That is incredible. I mean, wow. Talk about not even understanding your influence. And, I've heard fans tell us they learned to speak English by watching Pokemon and Yu-Gi-Oh! But this is beyond that.
Yes. And what I want to clarify is I don't take credit for any of that. Not a second of that. It's what he did with that and how he used it for himself, and then realizing maybe I can do that for others.
Well, paying it forward, that is an amazing bonus to this story. But I also think your approach to that character, as you were discussing, the style that you chose for his, the way he speaks, and the power behind who he is as a character, that is an example that I think would be something that you would be drawn to if you were trying to better yourself in terms of someone who had a problem speaking. The way you approach that character is eloquent, and is powerful, and is fatherly, and is knowledgeable. And you could have easily done it, and we've talked about this. You could have easily done it almost tongue in cheek, like there's no joke to it.
You can totally be corny
because it's legit. It's legit from the character. No, and that's it.
Now, some people say that what I do with that character is just kind of hammy, and I get that. I see why they take that away from it.
I don't think that at all, and I'm not just saying that because I'm your friend. I think that when a character is that, when that particular character is that way, it's not. There's no joke that he's in on. Playing it up as hammy. He just happens to be that way. And I think that the way you approached Yami, the Pharaoh, would definitely be something that I would try to emulate, especially if I were trying to even learn English. There's not a lot of character stuff going on there. It's strength. It's great. So that's amazing.
Well,
so
that as an archetype, let's just put that in a box for a second. So it's a royal archetype, and there's a lot of things that you can talk about. If we're talking about the history of royalty and how messed up that is. Sure, there's tons that we can criticize about that, and there's also when somebody is at that stature, and think of royal not just in terms of a birth line, but just as a sense of majesty, a sense of. Yes. I mean, majesty is a great word. And if you feel you own that space, you speak with certainty. You have complete conviction in what is right and what is wrong. And that clarity can be very powerful.
Sure. And you also made a choice. I mean, obviously we were following the animation to a degree, but we also played against the visuals when we could, when it called for that. You raised your voice very infrequently, maybe during battle, but not during the dialogue between characters. The strength was in the intimacy of it, not I have to be louder than my opponent. And that I think also came across as majestic.
Right.
Someone,
You're not always trying to shout someone down.
Yeah, someone who owns a very fast sports car doesn't need to speed and race you because they own a very fast sports car. Do you know what I mean?
Right.
That's
And,
what I think
and someone who feels whole in themselves don't even have to own a sports car.
That's right. That is right. Hey, man, it was a Mustang. I had to get it.
I love that you call it the Batmobile.
That's right. Well, that is really that's an amazing story and very sweet too. That's nice that you had a moment like that to experience.
And yeah, you were right next to me. You saw that.
Yeah, I remember you telling me that, and because I was right next to you. That was incredible. That was incredible.
Yeah.
Very sweet story.
Before we move on, I'm wondering, should we hear from a friend of ours? We haven't heard from him in a while.
Sure, and you would be talking about
Tips and tricks.
Oh yeah.
Welcome to Wizardly Words of Wisdom. I am your host, Tips and Tricks. I decided to take another aeroplane trip over the holidays, and when I checked in, they asked if I wanted to check my bag. And I said, for what? And they said, for your final destination. Oh dear, how tired must they be to think that where I wanted to go was inside my luggage? I don't know about that, but I do know a thing or two about being present. First, take a moment to take in what's around you, the colors, the sounds, the very energy of the area itself. Tuning into all of those details helps to dial you into where you are at. Number 2, focus on the present, not the past, not the future, but the now. Allow the moment you are in to be free of expectations or regret. And finally and thirdly, focus on one thing at a time. Dividing your attention between multiple things means that you aren't fully present for any of them. And if you fully focus on one thing, the better you will remember it later on. And thirdly and finally, some habits never die. But that's okay. I'll give you one more, just because I like you. Be grateful. The simple exercise of writing down just a few things you are truly grateful for can help relieve anxiety and stress, which can be oh so distracting. I hope you all had a wonderful holiday enjoying the presence of loved ones. That's all I have for you for now, but I'll look forward to the next time I can share with you some wizardly words of wisdom.
Well, once again, some incredible words of wisdom from our wizardly friend. I'll have to take note. I have been taking notes. Every time he tells us things, I take notes.
It's been a while. It's been like over a month. Yeah.
Well, I've got a long list of other things I need to do, but I've just added those things to my list. So you were telling the story about a fan that you met that was on the spectrum, and that just reminded me of just another story of mine, a fan experience of mine, but also the fan base that we are part of in the geek, cool, nerdy, quirky culture, which I include myself in. There is a percentage of those people that are on the spectrum, and it's something that has educated me. I have relatives that are on the spectrum, and it's something that's educated me on how to interact and how people interact, especially in social situations. Mm-hmm. And I find that the convention environment, the community, very inclusive. People seem to understand that could be something that someone is dealing with, and that's cool. It's totally cool. There's no judgment. There's no there's no what's wrong with that person. What's going on? It's a great way that I think we can behave in outside of the convention world. The way we treat each other. But it reminded me of a story, a moment that I had with a fan, a mom, and I guess I want to say her daughter was probably 10 or 11, came up to my table, and I sort of sensed that the daughter was on the spectrum just based on the way she was interacting with me, and the mom was doing was really doing the talking, explaining that she was a big fan of mine and what characters she liked the most, and they wanted to get an autograph and a photo with me, and I was talking to both of them for a little while. She really wasn't interacting with me, meaning the daughter, but the mom was, and when we went to go do the photo, as with everyone, and I think that it's something that everyone should ask, I always ask, do you mind if I put my arm around you? Even just to have any physical contact with someone before you invade their space, you should ask that. But I ask, and if they say yes, it's because I want it to look like we're pals. I do that with men, women, whatever. That's just what I do.
I do that for the same reason, but another one. Usually because I have an especially sweaty, sloppy armpit that's going to get near them.
Well, that's very kind of you. That's very, very kind of you. Yeah. So
I also have hazmat suits available if needed. But I'm sorry to interrupt. Go ahead.
That's all right. That's all right. So I asked permission first of the young woman, and she just kind of looked at me, and I looked to the mom, and she said, "It's really up to her." And I look back at her, and she nods yes, that it's okay. And so we take a picture together, and then they walk away, and that was great, and a great, great little moment. And then the mom came back to me about 10 minutes later and said, "Listen, I just want you to know that my daughter doesn't let anyone touch her, like anyone. Wow. And the fact that she let you put your arm around her is amazing." She said, "But I also have to say, I want to thank you for asking, because people sometimes just do that, and she will flip out. That makes her very uncomfortable." So from both of those comments, it made even more sense to me. It's like, not only should you always ask, but wow. So I got the okay. Like I don't know why I got the okay, but I did. And that was a very special moment for me. I know that there are those social cues that sometimes just don't make sense to people. And it's not to say that makes them, that they're doing the wrong thing, or that they should change the way they behave. But this was a way to connect with someone that I felt was special. I thought it was a nice moment. She's got a picture of it to remember that moment. And I have the visual picture of it, being able to connect with someone in a way that I like to show affection. I'm a hugger. That's what I do. I like to hug people. It's just what I do. Yes, I grew up in an ethnic family. It's a lot of hugging and kissing. That's what we do. And it's not always appropriate to do that to people you don't know. But that was a memory that I really thought was a special moment, and I was honored that she thought I was good enough to hug.
Well, and it also speaks to your credit that you were coming at the situation with a degree of sensitivity to others in general, and that allowed for this moment to happen, which is a very rare moment for this young woman. It is like, the cherry, on top.
Yep.
And that's wonderful. That's wonderful. And I'm glad that the mother, and also let's give a shout out to parents of children who are somewhere on the spectrum, and those challenges can present so differently. And it exists in my own family, and I don't know if I admire anyone more than how my family deals with that. They do such a good job. Anyway, it's just what a affirming story of understanding and sensitivity and devotion to providing the best experience possible for a young person dealing with challenges that they were never intending on having to deal with.
Yeah,
that's remarkable.
Thanks. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. So, what do you have another story you'd like to share with us?
I do, and before I get into that, I feel I should also address that I have resisted fandom you describe me as the J.D. Salinger of convention appearances. Not a lot of people will get that joke, but J.D. Salinger is notoriously a recluse, even though he's admired for his work.
Yep.
So, and I come from a background where pride is a bad thing. Perhaps that's taken to an extreme, but my nature is to not accept fandom. I feel like I shouldn't receive that. I feel like it's something that could lead to an inflation of my ego in a destructive way, and so it's unnatural to me. And that's largely why I think I resisted on camera stuff and pursuing the Hollywood path. And I just wanted to be an actor who did theater stuff and have a very humble life, creatively fulfilling, but really under the radar.
Yeah.
And that's in no way an evaluation of the fandom itself. It's the presence of fandom at all in my life, right? So I don't intend to be insulting to anybody who is a fan, but I had a conflict with that form of attention. And what I've learned opening up to it is that was dumb.
Well, I mean,
that's where I was coming from.
you are one of the more self-effacing people that I know. You do have a large fan base, and it's never gotten to your head. You've never been that way. But I also have witnessed how much emotionally it means to you when you do meet these people and hear their stories.
Oh yeah.
So it's mutually beneficial, and it's not something that's building your ego. You just realize that, hey, I don't think I'm the greatest thing in the world, but I've made a difference here, and I'm connecting with people, and they're sharing stories with me, and that's something nice to see, because you are so good with your fan base, because it's honest. Your emotional reactions are very. I mean, I've seen you have to take a moment. I mean, I've done it, but I've seen you have to take a moment because these things really affect you. And that just goes hand in hand with
in this podcast.
Sure. Yeah, no, I get it. But it goes hand in hand with the fact that you are not an egomaniac, and that your drive to be an actor has never been about how famous Dan Green can get.
No.
Ever.
No.
Ever.
And thank you for that. And I've said this a number of times in the past 6 months where I've been making more appearances. So people will say things like, "Oh, this is such a big deal for me. You have no idea. It's such a privilege to meet you," or just such a big deal to meet you. And I've said, what you may not understand, it's a big deal for me to meet you.
Mm-hmm. That is true. I mean, I say the same thing. People say, "It's great to meet you." And I'm like, "It's great to meet you." Like, and it's legitimately true.
And not because it serves me. It's just cool.
Yes, it really is cool. It really is cool. Yeah. So for all of those people out there who have the benefit of the 15 minutes of maybe some fame, do not take it for granted. Do not take your fan base for granted. Do not take the interaction with people for granted. Give them the time. Give them the moment.
Yeah, and I also want to offer at least some form of apology. There are fan letters that I have received that I did not respond to, and for those disappointed fans out there, please understand it was some combination of me just being overwhelmed, as my life has been fairly overwhelming since my wife died, and I don't use that as an excuse. It's just a functional reality, and also that that was happening before my wife died. And part of it was, a lot of it was, I just didn't feel like I should feed my ego in that way, But it was never that I thought what you felt was stupid. So anyway, so just to address that to some degree,
yes.
And I want to leave on the note, because this will be our last story for this podcast.
Yep.
So in the last 6 months or so, when I've been making more appearances, I have had on almost every occasion some interaction with somebody who belongs to the LGBTQ community.
Mm-hmm.
And this is a community that has this, designation, this, way of being identified. But I've been a part of that community, not because I'm gay myself, but when you're doing theater, you have to understand there are a lot of gay people in theater.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's Maddie Blaustein, who was the first transsexual I ever knew personally.
Mm-hmm.
And Maddie passed away many years ago, and was such a hero to so many who are with us today. And so I don't think of it being revolutionary for me to be involved with that community or accepting of that community. For me, it was a no-brainer. It was not a decision to treat them like human beings. That was just obvious. Mm-hmm. They are human beings, so I live and work with them. And some I know better than others, and I'm all for equal rights across the board. My thing that I hate the most is bigotry, in any form, and so anyway, in the last several months or so, I've had the pleasure of having a trans woman tell me, your portrayal of Yugi helped me find the path that led me to my truer self. Those maybe weren't the exact words said, but that was the gist of it. Mm-hmm. That there was something about, I think the term was softness of Yugi, that vulnerability, that Yugi isn't portrayed in sort of this, traditional masculine mm-hmm. way, right? And again, we're still at a time in our culture where we're redefining what those terms mean.
Yes.
But I understood what was meant by that, right? Yugi has a degree of, you could say, femininity, and I think that's a fair thing to attribute. But there was a young woman who approached me just a couple months ago with the pride flag and asked if I would autograph that. And of course I did, and I was happy to do so. And I was so pleased that she was really uplifted by that. She found that helpful to her, empowering to her. And it's so important that we, particularly in the regard of what does love mean and how it should happen, we should be open to love wherever it happens.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's interesting. I mean, you have that character that definitely has that dynamic. I have James from Pokemon, who people have told
absolutely.
Me has gender fluid, helping them come out and be themselves as well. I didn't approach that character with anything beyond what I thought a blue blood sort of obnoxious kind of, funny guy would be.
Right.
But if you get that from the character and the way that I portrayed James, then that's great.
Right. You might have been thinking more in terms of effete.
Yeah. I mean,
an old-fashioned term. But yes, we would associate feminine characteristics to it.
Right. But and growing up, with a mother as a dancer, surrounded by the dance world, that was just part of my, growing up as well, that environment.
Sure.
But I guess, I'm not a complete optimist about certain things, but I'm hoping one day, and I believe that we can reach that point, that we don't even have to announce what we are or put a label on anything. No. I don't wake up in the morning and open the door and yell to all my neighbors, "I'm straight."
Exactly.
I want people to celebrate who they are. And
right.
I know that opening this door of this conversation, people could say, well, what does he mean by that? And I believe in staying out of people's businesses. I believe in just letting people, if they're not hurting anyone, just let them live, let them be who they are.
Yes.
But I also don't want to try to label people, I just want them to just be themselves and just, that's my friend Dan, and that's my friend so-and-so.
Exactly.
That's,
yes.
The label I'm going to give you is you're my friend or you're my coworker or whatever, but that's the label I'm going to give you.
And labels can be empowering and they can also be limiting.
Yes.
And I think it really rests with the person who hears those definitions. And I completely understand what you mean about that day where we simply take people for who they are, meaning how they behave and
Yes.
how they treat others.
Yes.
The other stuff, not that it's irrelevant, but that's just other stuff.
Yes.
It's what we do with each other. It's how we treat each other that matters most.
Yeah, and I love seeing some of the Kaiba cosplay, the amount of young
Gender
women
bending, as it were.
gender, yeah, all of that.
That's probably an outdated term, and I mean no offense by using that.
But I just think the androgyny of Kaiba,
Yeah,
the fantastic outfits he has, I love it. I think that the cosplay world has no boundaries.
I
can
love
dress
that
up,
about that.
Yeah,
I love that.
It's
about
fantastic. So that's another way to celebrate who you are. Just dress up with whatever character you want to be. I think that's fantastic. And so James being who he is, Yugi being who he is, Kaiba being who he is. I just think that there is a beautiful example right in our fandom, in our diversity and our acceptance that's there, that I love to celebrate. So thank you to the fans for being who you are and sharing these stories with us.
Right.
It means a lot to us.
And you and I, we understand. We are two white, straight, old men.
Yep.
Like
I'm very old.
We're in a sense, we're the enemy. But we're not. We're not at all. And love is love, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, I think I can speak for both of us that we support that in all the forms that it happens.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah. All right. Well, let's bring this episode of The Heart of the Cards to a close.
Yes.
And I think next week we'll get back to the hero's journey and talk about apotheosis.
As long as I don't have to say that word.
I encourage our listeners to look it up beforehand. Just go to the wiki of the hero's journey. It's pretty accurate and helpful. Of course, we'll frame it for you for the next time. But what's provocative about that conversation, it's the idea that you are in full command of all of your powers.
Oh, boy.
And what do you do with that? And, of course, the hero's journey is this mythic progression, and it applies to our lives universally, but only in certain ways. I don't think that either Eric or I would say that we are in full command of anything, but we've had moments of feeling that sense of I can do, and making it happen. Mm-hmm. So we look forward to sharing that with everyone next time.
Yeah.
And also thanks to everyone who continues to write in to the AndromedaProductions.com website. And I have received more letters since our last episode, which was about letters, and we welcome those. We were also thinking about providing some focus to those, like asking a question and getting some responses on that, and we'll explore that more later. But for now, Eric, thank you for your time. Thank you for sharing your stories.
Thank you, Dan. Appreciate it.
Thank you for listening to mine and giving me your response and interaction. And to those who are listening, we always look forward to the next time we can share a conversation about creativity, inspiration, and dealing with what you're dealt.
Thanks for listening to The Heart of the Cards with Dan Green and Eric Stewart. We hope this conversation in some way spoke to you. Whatever your journey, we look forward to crossing paths again in the next episode. This is Veronica Taylor, and on behalf of Andromeda Productions, we wish you well.
Andromeda, always a sound choice.